Hello and welcome to the Storytelling with Puck podcast. We will, as always, start with a story.
When I first open my eyes, I see light. There are noises around me. I am afraid. I am handed from one person to another. I don't know them. But finally find myself staring at a face filled with love. I feel happy. As I am fed, I grow. As I grow, I learn to walk. As I walk, I start running. As I run, I also fall. I meet others like me. We become friends. We play together, sometimes fight together. I get a lot of toys, but I didn't like sharing. That caused problems. My friends didn't like it. I go to a place called school where I learn. At first, I didn't want to go. I cried for my mother. But as I meet others, I enjoyed it. We played together, even got into trouble. My parents want me to study, want me to be something. But I am enjoying my life. What more is there? As I grow older, I get pressured by family and society. Even though I work hard, I'm not really happy. As I grow older, books become my friends. As I deal with other people, their expectations increase. But no matter what I do, no one can be satisfied. It breaks my heart seeing people change. I fall in love thinking I have found the one. But alas, I get heartbroken. I still get married, loved or not. I have children, finding joy in them. I continue working hard to support my family. Despite my efforts, the boss won't treat me fairly. I go home tired, only to find my partner has left me. I become distraught. How do I take care of the children? I continue working like an animal on a farm. I grow older, yet continue to support my children. As my children grow older, they spend more time with their friends. No one wants me. I live alone now. I look down at my fragile body. Who will take care of it? When my time comes, where will I go? When everyone abandons me, it's then I ask, who am I?
Thank you, Garima. Before we start, a little note to anybody who is listening for the first time or anyone who might have forgotten. My name is Stefano. I run Puck Creations and I am the regular host of this podcast. If the title, Storytelling with Puck, hasn't given it away, this podcast is all about stories. We will share stories, chat about stories, and see how stories affect the business world too. Of course, we couldn't do any of that without our wonderful guests. And you just heard her ask, who am I? But I can tell you at least what her name is. And I would like to introduce to you the wonderful Garima Nabh. Garima, please tell us a little about yourself.
Okay, well, I am a blogger and a writer. I grew up in Nigeria and I studied microbiology from there in undergraduate. Then I came to London for my postgraduate. And it was when I was in London, during that time, my mother was sick with cancer. And we tried our best to get her the best treatment possible, but she couldn't make it. Then we had to go to India to do the final rites. Then after that, I went back to Nigeria because since my father is working there, so that he will not feel alone, I went to support him, and then I spent some time teaching in some schools, and then later I started blogging, and then I left teaching so that I can concentrate totally on my writing. So I'm even writing some book. So
okay, amazing. We've jumped a little bit there through quite a large story of your life from step to step. So it would be nice if we can explore a little bit more about all of that. So you said that you went back to India for the last rites for your mother. So were your mother was Indian? Your mother was born in India originally, and are you because you said that you grew up in Nigeria. Well, are you originally from India and then moved to Nigeria, or did your
No,
mum move to
actually, I
Nigeria?
was born there.
Okay. And so your mum moved to Nigeria,
Yes.
met your father there,
No,
and
no, my parents, it was after my parents got married, then they
yeah.
moved to Nigeria.
Okay, I see. Right. And so they moved to Nigeria. Do you mind if I ask why?
Well, it just a job opportunity, My father got a job offer and then he accepted it. And then since my parents were married, so my mother had to also go. And my parents, both of them are medical doctors. So my
Okay.
mother also got the opportunity to work there. So the two of them, they worked in the hospitals there.
Amazing. It's not something I need to say, but being a medical doctor is an incredible vocation. It's not just a job. And so the fact that they both moved there and then were able to give so much, I imagine that's something you're incredibly proud of.
Yeah. Yeah. They did a lot, I mean, especially my mother, because my mother was a gynecologist.
Okay.
So, like most of the women there, like they will have pregnancy issue or some, issue related to the women. So she had a lot of patience, and because she was very kind and hardworking and sincere doctor, so many people loved her, So,
Yeah, I can imagine.
so she was more popular than my father, actually.
I'm sure he'll admit that too, will he? He'll be happy to agree.
Yeah. So sometimes my father used to joke with her, Sometimes my father used to joke with her because normally it is expected that the man will be more successful than the woman. But in the case of my parents, it was the opposite. So my father,
They were
he used to
bucking the
be,
trend.
my father was proud, but sometimes, he used to tease her that, it's like you are the breadwinner of the family, not me.
I like that. I like that because it's ahead of the time. Actually, it's a lot more common now for the female in relationships. Again, if it's a male female relationship, for the female in the relationships to be the breadwinner. And it's not seen as something strange, but I imagine when they were younger, it was definitely something which was strange, and so I can understand how the teasing might have happened and the jokes. But it seems like your parents were both quite forward thinking, and it didn't really bother them, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah. They're my parents. They are very straightforward. They are honest and hardworking. So they are just simple people.
I like that, and so are you an only child? How many kids are in your family?
No, I have an elder brother.
Okay, and was he born? Was he born in India or was he born in Nigeria too?
In India.
He was born in India first, so he moved. How old was he when he moved?
I think he must have been around 4, 5.
Okay, so young enough possibly to remember little bits of it, but not to really have known what was going on.
Yeah.
Right. And so then he really grew up in Nigeria too.
Yeah.
And then what's the age gap between
then later
the two?
he came to London for his further studies, and since then he's here in the UK.
So he lives. I should say actually to our listeners. So Garima is currently in the UK, and so we're chatting over Zoom because I'm in the Netherlands, and so even though I'm from the UK, so we've got a lovely mix here. So your brother moved to the UK to study originally, and now he's also working there, and so he continued after.
Yeah, he has been here for over 20 years.
Okay, wow, that's a long time.
Yeah.
And so you said that you also, we're jumping ahead a little bit here. So you grew up in Nigeria, and then you also came over to the UK to study.
Yes.
And you were studying microbiology, did you say?
No, that was in the undergraduate. In the
Okay.
postgraduate, I studied biomedical science.
Biomedical science, right? Okay, which for many people, me included, is a complete,
Yeah, I know.
it completely blows my mind. So clearly very academically intelligent to be able to study that in Nigeria and then to come across to the UK to continue those studies. And so when you were studying, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do afterwards? Because I wouldn't say that it's the most common path to go from your postgraduate studies into what you're doing now as a writer. So what did you want to do at the time, or did you not know?
Well, actually, since I was studying science and that is related to the medical field, I was thinking of becoming a researcher,
Okay.
and maybe, if possible, even further, going further into PhD, you know.
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
science field, that is how it is,
Often, yes. I
Yes.
know I have a few friends who have, as you say, often with degrees, a lot of people go as far as the bachelor's or the master's, but then don't go as far as PhD. But when with science degrees, often they do. So, but you decided not to continue with the PhD and to continue with the research. What made you change your mind? What made you not want to do that anymore?
No, actually, like as I mentioned earlier, it was when I was doing my master's. During that time, my mother was diagnosed with the cancer, and my parents were like, going to India, coming to London, like that, to get the best treatments possible. So that situation really, shook the entire family. And
Yeah.
by the time I finished the university, and because the university where I studied, it is far away from our family house,
Okay.
so I was staying in the hostel there, you know.
In the
So
dorms, yes.
yeah, so I didn't know much about what was going on, because naturally my parents, they did not want me to be disturbed,
And they didn't want to worry you, and they
Yeah,
wanted you to be able to
exactly.
continue on your
So,
in your
but
studies, etc.
yeah, but by the time I finished, and then I came back to the family house, and then we used to take her to see the specialist doctors, and then they tried their best, but at the end they said that they could not do anything. So me, my father, and my brother, the three of us, we spent the whole time trying to take care of my mother, like to make the final days as comfortable as possible for her. So it was, a terrible time for the entire family. So I mean, in that situation, I couldn't think, of.
Yes, yeah, yeah. No, I understand completely. I genuinely do understand. So some people who are regular listeners to this podcast or who know me via other means will know that I lost my mum when I was 18, also through cancer. And at the time I was supposed to be studying for my A levels in the UK. And my whole mindset changed. I didn't want to study after that. I couldn't concentrate on anything other than what was happening to my mum. And so I completely understand that your mind was also in a different place, and there were the
Yeah.
practicalities of actually looking after your mum too,
Yeah,
and making
sleepless nights, and you know
yeah,
like
yeah.
trying to get better facilities even in the house, so it was. And then after she passed away, then going to India and to the holy place, and doing all the final rites, all that, it took so much time.
Yeah.
So I
So that
just, yeah, the whole thing about going further, it just,
your mind wasn't in it anymore, and it
yeah,
didn't
yeah, it
as
just
much as you wanted
completely
to do.
disappeared. So,
Yeah, I understand that. So I know it's a hard conversation to talk about, so we won't dig into it too much more. So you went to India, and your mother had her final rites, and we won't, again, like I said, we won't talk about this in too much detail. But after that happened, you said that your dad then moved back to Nigeria.
Yes, because his job, he still had his job, so.
Right, yeah, of course. So he has a lot of patients that needed him.
Yes.
And I imagine in some ways, I'm projecting here a little, but I know that, again, when I've had loss in my life, sometimes the last thing I want to do is sit around and do nothing. I need to do something, and I need to try and be helpful. So I imagine for him, he probably wanted to try and be helpful somewhere, right? And so,
yeah.
But you followed him so that you could be there with him.
Yeah, I mean, because my brother, he's still young. He can take care of himself. But my father, because of his age, and then, I didn't feel like to leave my father alone. So I just decided, that let me go and be with him and, spend some time to support him there. So
that's lovely. It's a truly lovely relationship that you clearly have with your family. It's a truly close relationship. And
thank you.
No, it's wonderful to see. And I know it's very hard for some people who don't have those relationships sometimes. I'm lucky. I had a very close relationship with my parents too. And so the pain of loss is extremely hard, but also the joy of knowing that I at least lived those glorious moments, I guess, with my family is, So I know how hard this is to talk about. So thank you so much for sharing this.
Thank you.
We'll move on. So you move back to Nigeria, you're with your dad, and then I guess at some point you realized that you needed to concentrate on your own life a little again and see what was going to happen with your own life.
Yes.
And you said that you moved into teaching.
Yes.
And so what were you teaching at the time? What did you this is in Nigeria. We're back to Nigeria.
Yes. Right. So I was teaching science.
Okay, which makes sense. Considering the degree you did, it's a perfect. You'd think that's quite a good path to go down. And so, who were you teaching? What kind of age groups were you teaching?
Actually, I didn't remain in the same school. Okay. I changed school. So I have taught in a secondary school and in a primary school.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah. So going through the different age groups, and I'm guessing teaching very different things in those classes as well.
Yeah, teaching in different schools, in different environment and different age groups, like as you said. So.
So I imagine with that teaching, there must have been a challenge in the different ways to communicate with those children and to be able to get your message across to them. And it leads us back to what we're doing here. And when we talk about stories, because we're talking about your teaching, we've talked about this a little before. I know there was one particular teacher who inspired you when you were younger as well, a gentleman called Mr. David. And I know you have a bit of a story about him. So it would be lovely if you could maybe share that with some of our listeners.
Yeah, it was during the time when I was preparing for the O-level. I wrote the International Cambridge exams. So at that time, not only me, many of the foreigners, because there are a lot of foreigners, they are Indians, Lebanese, Pakistani. So Mr. David, he was an English teacher, and he preferred to teach children in groups. So he used to group whoever wanted to learn from him. He will just group like according to your level, So, and he was a very kind teacher, and his concept was that you should not just limit your knowledge to what is in the textbook. Mm-hmm. You can watch the news or watch some documentary or anything, and use it to I mean, I really don't know exactly how to explain it, but what he was trying to say was that don't just depend on the textbooks.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is not everything.
Expand
You
your
have to
mind
be
and research
practical.
elsewhere. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes
You
a lot
have
of
to
sense.
expand your knowledge. For instance, let me just give an example. Sometimes there were sometimes when we used to go to his house. So in his house, he had made one room into like a small classroom, and he had a little library and television,
Yeah.
to help the students. So there was once when the group that I was in, we went to his house and he took us to that his room, and he showed us one cartoon of Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the name, but it was about Mickey Mouse that he was working with a wizard.
Mm-hmm.
And the wizard, as well, wizards are depicted wearing a gown and a hat,
Yeah.
and a spear, or I don't know what, something they'll be holding in their hand. So the wizard, after he did some stuff, he left his hat in the room where Mickey Mouse was like assisting him. So the wizard left the place, and Mickey Mouse was tempted to, take
Mm-hmm.
the hat because it was like it had magic in it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he took the hat, and then, because there was no dialogue, just background music. So the next thing they showed was that Mickey Mouse used the magic of the hat to create music.
Oh, yes. Brilliant.
And
Yeah.
they showed him that like he's on a rock, and there's the ocean and the waves, and then he's, like in the, the musicians when they
Yeah.
do their hands
The
like this.
conductors. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So like that, like as if he's playing or conducting music,
Yeah.
and then at the end, the wizard came, and then he was like, what the hell are you doing with my so
Yeah.
there was absolutely no dialogue, just music. So after we watched all that, so Mr. David was like, we should write an essay on it, what we think is happening,
Yeah. And
what
so it was to get an idea of everybody's different perspectives on what they had seen and the feelings that you had and things as well.
Yeah, what the
Because it's
characters
a
are
universal
doing.
story. This is a universal story which everybody in the world has probably seen at some point in their lives, but we all have our own idea of what the story means to us.
Yeah.
And is that kind of what he was
Our
what he was
own,
asking for?
our own, like what the characters were doing, what were they feeling,
Yeah.
what was the thought, like Mickey Mouse, what was he thinking at that time, that he was, behaving like a wizard himself. So, and no other teacher has ever done anything like that, so
Yeah.
I'm sure you can understand how unique that.
Yeah, so it felt to you completely different and inspirational, and so you wanted to learn again because you were being shared stories, right? You were being shared different aspects of life and different metaphors for what you could learn, rather than being, as you said at the beginning, stuck in a textbook and reading the granularities of grammar. You were actually understanding how stories piece together, and then from that you could then learn the details of grammar and how everything connects afterwards. But the excitement was there because you were able to watch something fun.
Yes.
Okay, that's wonderful. And so I know then you didn't see Mr. David for quite a long time until fairly recently, right?
Yeah, last year.
Okay, and so what happened there?
Well, he initially, many years ago, because he is a Ghanaian. So initially when he came to Nigeria, he He was a lecturer in a university, but then later he left the university and he has his own school. So even at that time when he was teaching, there were some times when we used to go to his school. So last year I got in contact with him again, and he still has that his school. So I went to see him and he was very happy,
Yeah.
to meet a former student. And I told him about my writing and I showed him my blog. And, I think for a teacher, there is no greater happiness than to see your former student, and what the student, who he has become, what is he doing.
Yeah.
So
Was he? Did he know about what you did at university and that you were doing science? Was he surprised that you had then moved into writing and away from science? Did he know any of that before, or had he kept up with?
No,
your life at all?
actually, I had not been in contact with him for a long time.
Okay, so he was just happy in that case that he'd seen that you'd gone into the world of what he was teaching, and
Yes.
so let's talk about that actually. So we'll go back to your story and we'll go back to where we left off before we started talking about Mr. David. And you were teaching and you were going between primary and secondary schools, but obviously science was the thing on your mind and what you were portraying to your children. So where was the moment when you decided, actually, this isn't for me, I don't want to teach science anymore, and I want to move into the world of writing?
Well, it's really hard to explain, because you see, the thing about life is that life is very unpredictable.
For sure.
You may plan that you want to do something or you want to study something, but what happens later, nobody knows. Some people are lucky that they plan to study a particular subject and they end up being in that profession. But there are some people that they will study one thing, but at the end of the day, they will be something else. So actually, that was in my case. I can't explain how I became interested in writing. Some things are not, there are some things you can't explain. They just happen.
It was just something that was within you that you wanted to write. I completely understand that. I also think as well, especially in the UK, we're often encouraged to be supposed to know what we want to do as an adult when we're maybe turning 12 or 13. We're supposed to plan this whole life out ahead of us. It's ridiculous. Nobody knows at 12 or 13 really. Well, some people do, but most people don't really know what they want to do when they're 12 or 13. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was 29. I didn't know which path I wanted to go down, and I'd worked in different sales and marketing careers, and I traveled, and writing as a career I didn't even realize it was a possibility. It didn't seem like something that I could do until I got older. I'd loved writing as a hobby, but I didn't know it was something that I could do. And so, like you, it wasn't necessarily one specific moment that got me into writing, but it was something that was there and it was in me. And when I started doing it, I realized it felt right. I realized it felt like where I should be and what I should be doing. Did you have a moment like that at all where you went, this is what I want to do and I'm enjoying it?
Well, actually, when I was younger, that was before, you can say when I was in secondary school, there were some moments when I had some idea of a story.
Yes, when we were young. It's almost time to find out what inspired Garima in her secondary school years. But before we get to that, a reminder. You're currently listening to episode 17 of the Storytelling with Puck podcast. We've been privileged to hear Garima read a wonderful poem and to tell us about some of the hardest moments of her life. Listen to the second part of this episode to find out more about Garima's movement into the world of writing and to see what she's doing now. Don't forget that we will, as always, end the episode with a story from Puck Creations. So, Garima, tell us more.
And when it was 99 and the 2000, when the new millennium started, that time my father, he had subscribed to this Time magazine.
Yeah.
So we used to get the magazines. So when the new millennium started, the Time in the Time magazine, they started some special editions, and those editions were about the past century, the famous personalities in different fields, whether it is politics or entertainment or business. So they made all those special editions, and we used to get them. So I found those ones very interesting, not just because they wrote about the famous people in the past century, but also about, I used to think that, for those writers, the ones who wrote all those biographies and articles, how much effort it must have taken them to write, all
Yeah.
those things just for this one special edition, or so sometimes I myself, I used to have some fictional story in my mind, but
Yeah.
I just used to dismiss it, because in those days, my parents wanted me to concentrate on my studies, so you
Yeah.
can say that there were some little moments,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it was not until just a few years ago it was in 2019 when I started my blog,
And to
and
tell our listeners a little bit more about your blog, what's your blog about?
well, my blog, the name of my blog is New Age Magazine. And in it, I write articles on different topics,
Okay.
like,
And so where does the inspiration for the topics come from? Is it just something that you've paid attention to during the week, or do you look for something in particular?
if I find, like, if I search online or in the news, if I find something interesting, or sometimes, sometimes when I think about some topic, some idea comes to the mind. So, and then I do my research and compile whatever information I get.
Perfect.
And then I also write book reviews, because I
Okay.
read a lot of novels. So I also write the ones that I feel they are really good. I write
Okay, so you're usually, when you're writing a review, it's not in the sense of a critic that will write about everything good and bad. You want to encourage the good ones and give them a bit of a platform.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's lovely. Actually, it's because I think many authors will tell you that it's very, very hard to get your work out there if you don't have a huge agent or a publishing contract, etc. So the fact that you're writing about these books, some are they a mixture of both famous and kind of less famous books, or how do you pick the books that you're writing about?
Yeah, actually, I'm not. I'm not strict like that. Whether the author is famous or not famous, no matter the genre, as long as I feel that yes, there is something good about this story or about the novel, naturally you will feel like sharing, so that others may also be curious to read, and then, like as you said, that the author will get a wider audience.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I like that, and I think there'll be some authors potentially listening to this who may be sending books your way, so that you can read them and give them a little review later down the line. So, you took part in our Storytelling with Puck initiative at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And that's where we heard the Mr. David story, and it's also where we've heard a few of your other stories. But because we're now talking in more detail about putting pen to paper, one thing that you did for Storytelling with Puck was write your first ever published or first ever poem that you put out to the public, so that people could see. And I know that was quite a nervous moment for you because it was letting your soul out on the line a little. But I loved it, and I'm sure our listeners will too. So would you maybe give them a chance to hear what you wrote?
All right. This is a short one. The title is I Pen. Made from plastic and ink, I am skillfully made. I can write as long as possible with no expiry date. I come in many colors, resembling a rainbow, like a character of many shades on a stage show. I put words on paper while being held carefully. That's why I am loved, even though unconsciously.
I'm sure that other writers who are listening to this will relate so closely to that poem. It's beautiful. I really love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it almost brings us back full circle, actually, to your original poem and your original story that we started this podcast off with. So tell me a little bit more about where the inspiration for that came from. You have almost explained the whole life within the space of just a few minutes within that poem. I really enjoyed listening to it. It was very powerful. What made you write it?
Well, you can say like my life experience together with, when you watch television, when you watch like in the news, things happening in the society, and then plus the experience that you get in your own life. Mm-hmm. When we are children, at that stage, we are innocent. We don't know the realities of the world, and because at that time, the only thing you think about is to be playing around, making friends, having fun. But as you grow older, you get more engaged with other people in the society. And then you get experience about that our human society can be cruel,
Yeah.
And in some cases, even your own family members can be cruel to you, Mm-hmm. Today, somebody can be your friend. Tomorrow, the person can turn his back on you. Yeah. Even if you didn't do anything wrong. And the problem with human beings is that our human psychology is very complicated. And I remember when I was in Nigeria, there's one, I have a few Nigerian friends who have been good to me. So I remember there was once I told one of my Nigerian friend, I told her that animals are better than human beings, because once you tame an animal and the animal recognizes you that, yeah, you are a good person, it will remain loyal to you for the rest of its life, while a human being is selfish. A human being will first think of his own benefit, So then that my friend was like asking me, like she was surprised. She was like asking me that, is it true? I said, yes. I said, don't you know? She said, didn't know. She didn't know that animals...
No, there is a lot of truth to that, actually. There is definitely a lot of truth to that. I know that people talk about canines and the empathy that they have.
So it was just an idea to write down, because there are some times that, there are some moments you will have something in your mind and you will not have peace of mind until you actually write.
Well, I'm glad you did, because it really is a wonderful poem, and it definitely makes you think. And it leads me on to one of the final questions for today's episode, which is so what are you doing? What are you actually doing now? What's your day-to-day life? Who are you working with, and what are you writing most days?
Well, like as I mentioned that now I am in London, in our family house. So taking care of my father, taking care of my brother, and then at the same time, I am working on my blog, and then also I on the LinkedIn. This one American woman, her name is Erica. So she got impressed, you can say, by one of my articles that
Brilliant.
when I posted the link to my blog, and then I am now writing articles for her blog
Okay.
also. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And at the same time, I am working with a group of authors. So I am writing. They are. I am writing for them this one fantasy. They also, what they did was that they made a podcast. So they are a group of them, about 4 or 5 different characters, and each person each person represents one character. So they made a podcast, and I had to listen to the podcast and write down who is saying what.
Okay, perfect. So
And
yeah,
then
you're
from
transcribing
there,
it for them. Yeah.
yeah, the transcript, and then from there I am working on writing the novel.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so that is my current project.
That's some work. That's it. So it sounds like you're extremely busy. But if people would like to find you to talk to you, or if they would like to read your blog, or to maybe get you to help them with some of their articles, etc., where can you be found? How can our listeners find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, on LinkedIn. My name is Garima Nabh. So, and then I my blog is www.newagemag. Not
New Age Mag.
magazine, is mag.
New Age
Yeah,
Mag.
MAG.
Keep off the Azine.
Yeah, dot blog. You know.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. We'll make sure that we put that in the show notes, and we'll put your LinkedIn on the show notes as well, and your Facebook page, so that people can find you there. Also, you can send me any other links if you remember later. So we'll add them to the show notes too. Garima, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I know that some of this conversation was hard to talk about, so I really appreciate that you
Yeah,
did.
I can't imagine, as I have listened to all the podcast, and I realized that, there are many people who have suffered greater than me, and yet they have the courage to come out and actually, share, So sometimes I feel that maybe, I don't know, my suffering is nothing compared to.
For my point of view on that, and it's not for me to judge or to say how you should feel, but my point of view and the way I feel about that is that it's not about comparison. If you listen back to Shayna's episode, she talks about this actually quite a lot. The idea that because one person is suffering somewhere with something, it means that you can't also be suffering is ridiculous. There are things going on in every single one of our lives. We all have our own struggles. They are different struggles, and they occur for different reasons. The fact that we're talking about them, and that's part of the reason this podcast exists. The fact that people are talking about them is something that hopefully means that we can all relate to each other. And what makes us humans is that level of understanding and empathy we can have when we actually take the time to listen to each other and to realize that we are a lot more alike than it sometimes seems. So I would ask that maybe you take that a little bit on board and don't feel like, you need to compare what you've been through to other people. What you've been through is what you've been through. And whatever it felt like to you is what it felt like to you. You don't need to worry about what everybody else thinks. That's my advice. I don't usually give advice.
You. And before I forget, I also I actually have my author website.
Oh yes.
And I even though I haven't published any book yet, but I have I already made my author website, and then I interview authors
Oh,
actually.
okay. Fantastic. So you're
Yeah,
interviewing other authors, as well as the reviews you're doing, you're also interviewing authors who are.
yeah, yeah,
Have they finished their books, the authors that you're interviewing, or are they partway
yeah,
through their books?
yeah, yeah,
They finished them, okay, so they've got
yeah.
a. Okay,
They already
fantastic.
have published books, so yeah, I just had this idea, to keep on being active, and then you give people the opportunity to talk about what they have done or what they
Yeah.
have achieved, you know.
That's a great thing to do, and it's wonderful that people have the opportunity to talk a little bit more in depth about their inspiration. It's part of the reason that we do these podcasts as well, so that we can get people to explain where their process comes from and how they think of their ideas, etc. So it's great that you do that. We'll make sure that we add that to the show notes as well, so that people can see it.
All right.
But what I should remind our listeners of now is that just after we say our goodbyes, we will of course be having a puck creation story. But for now, Garima, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on the Storytelling with
Thank
Puck
you
podcast.
also for taking your time. I have never had this type of situation since I started having all these Zoom meetings, first from the storytelling and now, one to one. So I really, really am very thankful to you. And I really
It's
appreciate
genuine.
listen to your podcast. So you're doing a lot for other people, for them to come out and talk about their lives. That is also a great service.
Well, it's genuinely a pleasure, and it's selfish because I enjoy it too. No, it's
I
genuinely a
think
pleasure.
I think if you are selfish for a good thing, that is good.
That's fair. That's fair. But no, genuinely, it is a pleasure, and thank you again, Grima. And for now, it's goodbye. But we'll make sure that we catch up again soon. Shows how much of a problem I have with eating too much, I guess. All of that drama, all of that pain, and yet my first thought is almost always the strawberry bonbons. They were definitely better back then. My mum's childhood home still feels like a second home to me. My Auntie Josie, who owns it now, would always give me the biggest hug, being that we were both the babies of our families. I hated the stink of smoke when my dad clogged up the bathroom at home, but somehow the mixture of old cigarettes on Josie's cardigan, smoke from the open fire, and peat was the most welcoming smell I could imagine. It was the smell that told me I would be getting spoiled rotten for 6 whole weeks, and that my parents would allow me to get away with it. A few days in, and it was time for another trip. As a 10-year, 11-month-old who only ever wanted to eat cake, play football, and watch TV, the idea of driving around some of the most beautiful parts of the world to see some hills and ponds didn't exactly make me jump with joy. Josie took my side, as always, and said I could stay home with her, but my parents rightly insisted that I come along to take in the real island. They promised me that it would be a lot of fun, and they even offered an ice cream at the end if I behaved myself. It seemed worth it, so I sat next to my sister in the back seat of the Volvo and we started to explore. Dad always drove a little bit faster at the top of hills to Mum's annoyance, but he knew that we all enjoyed the weird feeling it made in our stomachs. It was a really nice day, and all of the tight turns and swerves made the drive feel like a roller coaster. I was always a bit scared of roller coasters, but I knew this one was okay because, well, Dad was driving, and Dad could do anything. We stopped quite a lot, stretched our legs, and looked at the incredible views. As we stood staring over the roaring mountains that made sure the mystical monsters couldn't escape from the world's deepest lakes, I realised that this was way more fun than watching TV. Mum even told us about her childhood and showed us the places that she used to go and visit after school. We had ventured quite a bit further out by the time I woke up. As much as I was enjoying the day, the fresh air had made me tired. there was a sign on the way in that said, "The Gap of Dunlow." We parked up next to a bridge over a flowing river and beauty on either side. My grogginess disappeared pretty quickly, and all I wanted to do at that point was run around and play. We decided upon a game, I since learned that it's called poo sticks, that involved dropping something, traditionally a stick, on the upstream of a bridge and running to the other side in order to see it before it disappeared. Simple, harmless fun. At least that's what we thought. As the door hit me on the top of the head, I was actually a little grateful. It took the pain away from my leg for just a split second. My sister was being caring, but she was also in somewhat of a panic. Although I didn't realise it at the time, it was probably because my foot was facing in the opposite direction to my leg. The lady who hit me didn't mean to. In fact, it wasn't really her fault at all. I had turned around, chasing the item I had thrown in the river, and ignored the years of lessons and warnings I had been given about crossing the road without looking. In my defence, I still had a month before I turned 11. Supposedly, the real problem didn't come from the impact of the car. It came from the way my foot was wedged to the floor. As my body moved, my foot didn't, and that caused it to snap. Mum called an ambulance, but seeing as we were in the middle of nowhere, it would have taken a couple of hours to arrive and another couple of hours to get me to Tralee Hospital. Dad took it upon himself to pick me up and lay me across the back seats of the car. My sister was desperate to help, so she closed the door quickly. She just forgot to move my head. That was the least of my worries. It turns out that my parents literally saved my leg. I didn't know this until 6 months later, but the doctors at the hospital said that if we had waited for an ambulance, my leg would have had to have been amputated. All I knew was that I had to wear a cast, which I was allowed to ask people to write on, and that I had to use crutches for a while. The day I got home, I was welcomed back by my family with a big banner and a lovely cake. So I got what I wanted after all. My aunt still jokes that I should have stayed at home with her, but if I had, I would have never received those wonderful strawberry bonbons. To this day, I don't remember who it was that brought them, and neither does anyone else, but I do remember the kind face and smile. I had been in a lot of pain that day, so I had been told to go rest in bed. "Stefano, a visitor!" was the call, before this man entered the room and wished me well. He offered me the sweets which I had never before had, and left again. The sweet taste of that first bonbon seemed to instantly free me from the pain. To this day, those bonbons are the first thing I remember whenever anyone asks about that time you broke your leg. Strange how memories work, isn't it? Bonbon, anyone?
You've just been listening to the Storytelling with Puck podcast. We'll be back very soon, so make sure you subscribe and catch up on any of the episodes you've missed.